In the early months of 1942, the Japanese Empire stood at the height of its power. Their fleets ranged across the Pacific with confidence, seizing territory after territory in a wave of victories that stunned the world. Malaya, Singapore, the Philippines, and Burma had fallen. In the first 6 months of war, the Imperial Japanese Navy had won every major battle. Their carriers, the sharp edge of naval warfare, seemed untouchable. America, reeling from the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, found itself on the defensive. Its Pacific fleet had been crippled, battleships reduced to wrecks in shallow water. In Washington and Honolulu, strategists wondered whether Japan's advance could even be stopped. For many, it seemed the Pacific was now a Japanese ocean. But Japan's leaders were not content with their string of victories. They sought to lure the Americans into a decisive showdown, a clash that would destroy what remained of U.S. carrier power. The target they selected was a small, isolated atoll called Midway, barely a speck of land, yet of immense importance. Located roughly halfway between Asia and North America, Midway was the outer shield for Hawaii. If Japan seized it, Pearl Harbor itself would be within range of continuous attack. The United States would be pushed back to the mainland, its presence in the Central Pacific effectively broken. The Japanese plan was bold, even arrogant. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet, believed American morale was fragile. If he could annihilate their carriers near Midway, Washington would have little choice but to sue for peace. The plan involved a massive armada, 4 of Japan's most powerful carriers, Akogi, Koga, Soryu, and Haryu, escorted by battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. Their mission: strike Midway, draw out the U.S. fleet, and destroy it in one crushing blow. But Yamamoto's confidence hid a dangerous flaw. He assumed the Americans were blind to his intentions. He was wrong. Inside a cramped office in Pearl Harbor, a team of U.S. Navy cryptanalysts had been working tirelessly for months. Led by Commander Joseph Rochefort, they had cracked Japan's naval code, known as JN-25. Through fragments of intercepted messages, the Americans pieced together the enemy's plan. They did not know every detail, but they knew enough. A major operation was coming, and its target, referred to as ARF, was almost certainly Midway. To confirm it, the Americans set a trap of their own. Midway's garrison was ordered to send an open radio message claiming their freshwater supply was failing. Within hours, Japanese intercepts reported that AF is short of water. The ruse had worked. Now there was no doubt. Japan was coming for Midway. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, seized the opportunity. With only 3 carriers available, Enterprise, Hornet, and the hastily repaired Yorktown, he prepared an ambush. It was a desperate gamble. Outnumbered, his ships still bore the scars of earlier battles. Yorktown, damaged at Coral Sea, had been patched together in just 3 days. Yet Nimitz believed surprise could level the odds. Instead of waiting for Japan to strike, he would place his carriers northeast of Midway, hidden beyond the horizon, ready to pounce when the enemy exposed itself. On Midway itself, the tiny atoll braced for attack. Its runways were lined with Marine Corps fighters and bombers, Army Air Force B-17s, and even a handful of antiquated torpedo planes. Pilots knew they stood little chance against Japan's elite flyers, but they were determined to fight. Civilians had long since been evacuated. Now the garrison waited, fully aware that they might not survive the coming storm. As May turned to June, the 2 great fleets moved toward destiny. For Yamamoto and his admirals, Midway was to be the crowning achievement of their empire, a victory that would secure Japan's dominance for decades. For Nimitz and his men, it was the chance to halt the enemy's advance and strike back when the world least expected it. On June 3, 1942, the first sightings of the Japanese fleet reached Midway. The battle that would decide the future of the Pacific was about to begin. Dawn broke over Midway on June 4, 1942. The horizon glowed orange as Japanese carrier aircraft over 100 strong roared toward the tiny atoll. Dive bombers and torpedo planes, escorted by nimble Zero fighters, descended on Midway's airfields and defences. Explosions ripped through hangars and runways, setting fuel stores ablaze. Marines on the ground fought back with anti-aircraft guns, filling the sky with black bursts of shrapnel. The defenders could not stop the assault, but they bled the attackers, downing several planes before the strike was complete. From the runways of Midway, American aircraft scrambled in waves. B-17 flying fortresses lumbered into the sky, launching high. Altitude bombing runs against the Japanese fleet. They scored no hits. More desperate were the outdated torpedo planes and fighters that attacked at low level. One squadron after another charged the approaching carriers, only to be met by swarms of Zeros. Outgunned and outmaneuvered, they were cut to pieces. Some squadrons lost every plane, yet their sacrifice was not in vain. Far to the northeast, hidden beyond Japanese scouting lines, 3 U.S. carriers waited. On the decks of Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, pilots prepared for their own strike. Orders came swiftly: launch everything. Torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and fighters roared off the decks, climbing into the morning sky. Their mission: find and destroy the Japanese carriers. The first to arrive were the torpedo squadrons. Flying low and slow, they pressed their attacks with grim determination. At Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet, all 15 planes were shot down. Only one pilot, Ensign George Gay, survived, floating alone in the ocean as the battle raged. Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise and Squadron 3 from Yorktown fared little better. Almost every plane was destroyed, crews lost in flames or swallowed by the sea. The torpedo attacks were disastrous in terms of losses, but they achieved something unexpected. By drawing Japanese fighters down to sea level, they left the skies above relatively unguarded. The carriers themselves were forced to maneuver violently, dodging incoming torpedoes, which disrupted their flight operations. Japanese decks were crowded with fueled aircraft, rearmed for a second strike on Midway. It was in this moment of chaos that fortune turned. High above, unseen until now, U.S. dive bombers arrived. Delayed, scattered, and nearly out of fuel, they had struggled to find the enemy. At last, led by Commander Clarence McCluskey, Enterprise's squadrons sighted the Japanese fleet. With the enemy distracted below, the sky belonged to the Americans. At 10:20 a.m., the dive bombers struck. From near vertical angles, Douglas SPD dauntless bombers screamed down upon the Japanese carriers. Their bombs fell with deadly accuracy. In minutes, Akogi, Koga, and Soryu were ablaze, their decks erupting into firestorms. Planes loaded with fuel and ordnance exploded where they stood, sending fire racing through hangars. Sailors fought desperately, but the inferno could not be controlled. 3 of Japan's 4 carriers were mortally wounded, transformed from proud warships into burning hulks. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commander of the carrier strike force, was stunned. Hours earlier he had believed victory was assured. Now his fleet was crippled. 3 carriers lost in the span of 5 minutes. Only Haryu remained still operational, and her commander launched immediate counterattacks. Haryu's first strike targeted Yorktown. Bombs tore into her decks, leaving her listing and smoking. Damage control teams fought valiantly, bringing the carrier back into action within an hour. But Haryu's second wave found her again. This time torpedoes slammed into Yorktown's side. She went dead in the water. Though her crew fought to save her, the great ship was doomed. She would later sink, a casualty of the desperate struggle. For the Japanese, Haryu's strikes offered a glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting. American dive bombers located her that afternoon. Once again, dauntless bombers rolled into attack. Their bombs smashed through her decks, igniting raging fires. By nightfall, Haryu too was a wreck, abandoned by her crew as she sank beneath the waves. The tide of battle had turned completely. In the course of a single day, the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost 4 carriers: Akogi, Koga, Soryu, and Haryu. The heart of its striking power, the same force that had attacked Pearl Harbor just 6 months before, was gone. The cost to the Americans was heavy. Torpedo squadrons had been almost annihilated, and Yorktown lay mortally wounded. Hundreds of pilots, sailors, and marines had given their lives, yet in exchange they had achieved what once seemed impossible. They had broken the back of Japan's carrier fleet. As darkness fell over the Pacific, burning ships marked the horizon. Survivors clung to rafts and debris while sharks circled below. The sea was littered with wreckage, steel twisted by explosions, oil spreading in dark slicks, the silence broken only by the cries of the wounded. The Battle of Midway was not yet finished, but its outcome was already clear. Japan's advance had been halted. For the first time in the war, the mighty Imperial Navy had been dealt a crippling defeat. By the morning of June 5, 1942, the sea around Midway was a graveyard of fire and steel. 4 Japanese carriers, Akogi, Koga, Soryu, and Haryu, had been sunk or left burning wrecks. The pride of the Imperial Navy's striking force, the very same ships that had spearheaded the assault on Pearl Harbor, were gone. For the United States, victory had come at a heavy price. The carrier Yorktown lay stricken, torpedoed, and bombed into submission. Her crew fought heroically to save her, patching ruptured hulls and pumping out seawater. For a brief time it seemed she might survive. But on June 6, a Japanese submarine slipped through the American screen and fired a spread of torpedoes. Yorktown, already mortally wounded, finally capsized and slipped beneath the waves. The destroyer Hammond, assisting her, was also lost. Hundreds of sailors went down with their ships. Even in triumph, the cost of Midway was written in blood and sacrifice. Entire squadrons of American torpedo bombers had been annihilated. Young pilots, barely trained, had flown into impossible odds, knowing their chances of survival were slim. Their bravery had paved the way for the dive bombers who struck the killing blows. Out of those doomed flights, only a handful of men returned. For Japan, the losses were far worse. More than 3,000 sailors and airmen perished. Even more devastating was the loss of experienced pilots and crewmen, veterans who had carried Japan's naval air arm to victory after victory. Unlike the United States, Japan had no vast training programs ready to replace them. Each loss was permanent, a wound that could not be healed. Strategically, Midway marked a turning point. Until June 1942, Japan had dictated the pace of the war. Their conquests had stretched from Burma to the Solomons, their fleets striking wherever they pleased. After Midway, the initiative shifted. The Imperial Navy was forced onto the defensive, never again able to mount a large-scale offensive operation with its carriers. For the United States, the victory was more than just a battlefield success. It restored confidence at a moment of despair. The nation that had been shocked and humbled at Pearl Harbor had now struck back with force. Midway proved that Japan could be beaten, that determination and intelligence could overcome even the most formidable opponent. Historians have debated what made Midway decisive. Some argue it was intelligence, the brilliant work of Rochefort's codebreakers, who gave Nimitz the knowledge to set his trap. Others emphasize leadership, Nimitz's calm decision-making, Spruance's steady hand in battle, McCluskey's daring dive bomber attack. Still, others point to sheer courage. The torpedo pilots who sacrificed themselves, the sailors who kept damaged ships afloat, the mechanics who readied planes under fire. The truth lies in the combination of all these factors. Midway was not won by luck alone, nor by any single decision. It was the product of resilience, skill, and sacrifice. In Tokyo, the defeat was concealed from the public, but Japan's leaders understood the magnitude of the disaster. Their gamble to destroy America's carriers had failed disastrously. From that point onward, Japan would fight a defensive war, retreating step by step across the Pacific. The men who fought at Midway carried the memory with them for the rest of their lives. Survivors spoke of the courage of comrades who never came home, of the roar of engines and the chaos of burning ships, of the sight of the Pacific horizon filled with smoke and flame. For some, it was the defining moment of their service. For others, it was a scar that never healed. Today, Midway Atoll is a quiet place. The runways still exist, the lagoon still sparkles in the sun, but the roar of battle has long faded. Beneath the calm waters lie